There comes a moment when the crowd fades, the noise disappears, and you are left standing in the vast silence of your own being. For many, that silence feels unbearable, almost frightening, because it exposes what lies beneath, the truth of who they are when the world is no longer watching. But loneliness is not a curse, it is a mirror that reflects the self you've long ignored. When you stop running from that silence and begin to sit with it, loneliness transforms into the most profound teacher. In that stillness, you don't just find peace, you find yourself. Loneliness is not the absence of something, it is the presence of space. Most people fear it because they see it as emptiness, as a dark void that needs to be filled with noise, people or distraction. But if you allow yourself to sit with it, to breathe within that space, it slowly reveals its true nature. Loneliness is not here to punish you, it is here to show you what remains when everything else is gone. In that silence, you meet your own existence without filters, without masks. When the mind is constantly occupied with the world, there is no time to listen to yourself. You become lost in endless conversations, comparisons and expectations. But when life pushes you into solitude, it is gifting you a chance to return home to your inner self. That space of loneliness is where the noise fades and clarity begins to form. It is in that stillness that awareness blossoms, and you begin to understand that your worth does not depend on anyone's presence or approval. Awareness is what transforms loneliness into peace. When you look at your loneliness with awareness instead of fear, it stops being painful and starts being powerful. You begin to observe your thoughts, your emotions, your restlessness, and through that observation, a light emerges within. You realize that nothing outside you can truly complete you. The more you understand yourself, the less dependent you become on external validation or company. What once felt like isolation now becomes sacred. The same silence that once terrified you becomes your teacher, guiding you toward inner balance and strength. Loneliness teaches you to listen deeply to your breath, your intuition, your truth. It is the fire that burns away your illusions and reveals the core of your being. In that realization, you no longer crave constant company because you have discovered the vastness of your own presence. Loneliness, when seen through the eyes of awareness, turns into a sanctuary of growth. It becomes the soil where self-discovery takes root. You no longer escape from it, you rest within it. It refines your perception, deepens your consciousness, and helps you connect with life in its purest form. The pain of being alone transforms into the strength of being whole, and in that wholeness, you find a peace that no company can replace. The world can be overflowing with people, noise and activity, yet a person can still feel completely empty inside. You can be surrounded by laughter, conversation and movement. But if you are disconnected from your own inner self, everything around you feels hollow. The emptiness does not come from the absence of others, it comes from the absence of connection with your own being. When your sense of worth and meaning depends only on what happens outside of you, even the brightest moments lose their depth and fade into silence once the crowd is gone. You can be in a room full of people and still feel unseen, unheard and untouched. This is because the real connection you seek is not external, it is internal. Until you learn to meet yourself, no one else can truly meet you. The world teaches you to keep searching for fulfillment in relationships, possessions and success, but all these things are temporary. They can entertain your mind for a while, but they cannot fill the emptiness that lies deep within. That void can only be filled by awareness, by turning inward and becoming intimate with your own consciousness. When you begin to connect with yourself, you start to feel whole even in silence. The presence of others becomes a joy, not a necessity. You no longer seek approval because you are no longer running from yourself. The emptiness that once felt like pain begins to transform into peace because it is no longer a space of lack, it is a space of potential. From that stillness, strength rises naturally without effort. You realize that true companionship is not about being with others, but about being in harmony with yourself. The world outside you will always shift. People will come and go, circumstances will change, but your inner presence can remain constant. When you live connected to that presence, you stop depending on the world to make you feel alive. You find a quiet completeness within that cannot be taken away. In that awareness, loneliness loses its grip because you begin to feel the fullness of life moving through you in every breath. To be truly alive is not to be surrounded by people, it is to be rooted in your own being. When you touch that inner stillness, even in the busiest crowd, you remain undisturbed. The emptiness turns into clarity, the silence becomes your strength, and your connection with life deepens beyond words. This is the moment you realize that the fullness you were seeking outside was always waiting within. When you allow yourself to be alone without resistance, something powerful begins to happen. The noise that constantly fills your mind starts to fade and the endless chatter of thoughts begins to settle. In the stillness of solitude, you begin to see things as they truly are, not as your fears or desires shape them. Solitude strips away the illusions created by constant distractions and forces you to face your inner reality. It is in this space of quiet that clarity begins to emerge, revealing what truly matters and what merely pretends to. When you are constantly surrounded by people, their thoughts, opinions and emotions blend into your own until you forget what your own voice sounds like. Solitude separates the true from the false. It creates distance between you and the noise of the world, allowing you to recognize your own energy, your own truth. It is not isolation, it is purification. Every moment spent alone with awareness becomes a mirror reflecting your inner landscape. In that mirror, you begin to see the chaos and the calm, the confusion and the wisdom that coexist within you. When the mind finally slows down, it becomes like still water, clear enough to reflect truth. The constant rush of life clouds perception, making you react to everything without understanding it. But solitude brings the pause needed for observation. When you observe yourself without judgment, you begin to understand the roots of your fears, the patterns of your thoughts, and the nature of your emotions. This understanding brings power because what you understand no longer controls you. What once felt heavy begins to lose its weight. Solitude is not about escaping people or responsibilities, it is about reconnecting with the source of your strength. It gives you the chance to gather your scattered energy and focus it inward. When you turn inward, you touch the center of your being, the space that remains unshaken no matter what happens outside. That awareness makes you more stable, more alive, and more capable of facing life's challenges with balance and purpose. In solitude, truth doesn't have to be searched for, it simply reveals itself. You begin to see that clarity is not something to be gained, it is something that appears when the dust of distraction settles. The stillness of being alone is not emptiness, it is fullness without noise. When you experience that depth within yourself, the chaos of the world can no longer confuse you. You become rooted, peaceful and unshakably clear. The human mind has become a prisoner of noise. It constantly seeks distraction to escape its own restlessness. From dawn to dusk, people surround themselves with sound, movement and stimulation just to avoid silence. But in doing so, they lose touch with their own essence. When you are addicted to constant activity, Your awareness becomes scattered and shallow. You may appear busy, even productive, but inside you remain distant from yourself. The more noise you invite into your life, the less you are able to hear the quiet truth that exists within you. When you strip away the distractions, the silence that follows can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. That discomfort is not the problem, it is the beginning of awareness. The mind that has lived on external excitement finds stillness unbearable because it exposes everything you've been running from. It brings you face to face with your fears, your insecurities and your emptiness. Yet, that confrontation is essential. You cannot heal what you refuse to face, and you cannot understand yourself if you never stop to listen. When you stop trying to run from your loneliness and begin to observe it, a transformation begins. The mind is used to escaping anything that feels uncomfortable, but awareness has the power to change the nature of what you experience. When you look directly into your loneliness without judgment, you begin to see that it is not an enemy but a mirror. It shows you your hidden fears, your suppressed desires, and your forgotten strength. Awareness brings light into that dark space, and what once felt heavy begins to reveal its meaning. Most people try to cover their loneliness with noise, work or relationships, but this only buries the problem deeper. The moment you stop escaping and start witnessing, you begin to see that loneliness is not asking to be fixed, it is asking to be understood. It is a doorway to self-awareness, not a wall blocking your happiness. In that still observation, you learn that what you called loneliness was actually your own longing to connect with yourself. The emptiness you feel inside is not a lack, it is space waiting to be filled with consciousness. Being alone is often misunderstood as being lost, but true aloneness is not a sign of weakness, it is the foundation of strength. When you can sit in your own presence without reaching for someone or something to fill the silence, you begin to discover your own completeness. The world teaches you to measure your worth by your connections, achievements and possessions, but these are fragile. When they are gone, you are left facing yourself, and in that moment, you realize that your existence has value beyond what the world gives or takes. When aloneness is embraced consciously, it transforms into clarity. It frees you from the constant need for approval and recognition. You no longer chase validation because you understand that your worth does not depend on the reflection others show you. You start to stand firmly in your own truth, grounded and steady. In that awareness, every action you take becomes rooted in strength, not insecurity. You stop living to please the world and begin living in alignment with what feels right within you. When you depend on others to make you feel complete, you give away the power that belongs to you. The mind creates the illusion that happiness, peace and fulfillment lie in someone else's presence, but that illusion always breaks. You keep chasing connection after connection, only to find that the emptiness returns once the novelty fades. The truth is, no one can complete you because you were never incomplete to begin with. The moment you realize that your wholeness does not depend on anyone else, you stop begging for love and start radiating it from within. When you seek validation from others, your peace becomes fragile. It rises and falls with their approval, their attention, their moods. You become a puppet of external emotions, dancing to the tune of others' acceptance. But when you begin to turn inward and find satisfaction in your own presence, you free yourself from that invisible chain. You start to experience a different kind of peace, one that is not built on praise or comfort, but on awareness and acceptance of yourself as you are. Discovering your completeness within does not mean you reject relationships, it means you approach them without neediness. You stop looking for someone to fill your void and instead you share from the overflow of your inner fullness. Love then becomes an act of giving, not of seeking. You begin to connect with others not out of desperation but out of understanding. Your relationships become lighter, purer and more real because they are no longer built on fear of being alone. Silence is not emptiness, it is depth. It is the space where life begins to whisper truths that cannot be heard in noise. The constant rush of the world keeps the mind restless and scattered, but silence brings everything back into alignment. It allows you to see beyond words, beyond thoughts, beyond the surface of your own being. In silence, the chaos that once seemed overwhelming starts to lose its power. What remains is clarity, stillness, and the quiet strength that comes from simply being aware. When you immerse yourself in silence, you begin to experience life without filters. Every sound, every movement, every breath becomes more alive. You start to sense the pulse of existence in ways that no conversation or distraction can offer. Silence sharpens perception and softens the ego. It strips away the false layers of identity that noise builds around you. In that stillness, you do not become less, you become more real, more grounded, and more connected to everything around you. Silence teaches patience in a way no lesson ever can. It does not force you to wait, it simply slows you down until you begin to move in rhythm with life itself. In silence, you learn to listen, not with your ears, but with your awareness. You begin to understand that most of life's answers are not spoken, they are revealed when the noise of your thoughts subsides. Silence becomes the bridge between confusion and understanding, between restlessness and peace. Through silence, gratitude blossoms naturally. When you stop speaking and start feeling, even the smallest moment becomes sacred. The sound of the wind, the warmth of sunlight, or the beating of your own heart becomes a reminder of how deeply connected you are to existence. Silence allows you to appreciate what words often fail to express. It opens your eyes to the subtle beauty hidden in ordinary things. You begin to see that nothing is missing and everything you truly need is already here. Freedom is not about doing whatever you want. It is about being free from the constant need for approval. The moment you become comfortable in your own company, the world loses its grip over you. Opinions, judgments, and expectations no longer dictate your peace. You begin to act from clarity rather than pressure. Most people spend their lives enslaved by what others think, shaping their choices to please or impress. But when you stand firmly within yourself, that invisible cage breaks. You stop living as a reflection of others and start living as an expression of your truth. Being free within yourself means you no longer need validation to feel worthy. You understand that opinions are fleeting and trying to control them is like chasing the wind. When you are rooted in self-awareness, you no longer seek acceptance because you are no longer afraid of rejection. You begin to realize that true strength does not come from control over others, but from mastery over your own reactions. The person who is inwardly free can walk through praise and criticism without being disturbed by either. Loneliness, when faced with awareness, becomes a passage toward awakening. It is not the absence of people that hurts, it is the absence of connection with your own being. When you stop resisting the silence that loneliness brings, it begins to transform. The space that once felt cold and empty turns into a mirror, reflecting your truest nature. Every feeling of isolation starts revealing its deeper meaning, showing you that you were never truly alone. You were only unaware of your own presence. When you sit in your loneliness without distraction, you begin to see its purpose. It is not there to break you, it is there to bring you closer to yourself. The world keeps you busy, constantly pulling your attention outward. But loneliness pulls you inward, demanding that you face the parts of yourself you've long ignored. It forces you to meet your fears, your insecurities, and your truth. In that meeting, understanding is born. You start to see that loneliness is not darkness, it is the first light of awareness. The more consciously you embrace solitude, the more it sharpens your perception. You begin to sense the quiet rhythm of life moving within you. The walls that once separated you from the world begin to dissolve and a subtle oneness takes their place. In that stillness, the need to belong fades away because you realize you already belong to existence itself. Loneliness turns from a wound into wisdom, from heaviness into harmony. It becomes the soil from which strength and self-knowledge grow. When you stop running from your loneliness and begin to embrace it, a miracle unfolds. You no longer feel alone. You begin to sense the quiet pulse of life moving through you, reminding you that you were never separate from existence itself. Loneliness, when understood, is the seed of awakening. It breaks the false connection with the outside world and leads you toward the infinite connection within. In that realization, the emptiness that once hurt you becomes the very space where your soul begins to bloom.